That fateful day, when my father condemned me to death by declaring my salvation prohibitively expensive, I, a 19-year-old, trembled with terror in a hospital bed, entangled in tubes. He appeared in the doorway of room 314 at Denver Hospital. My mother, like a shadow, stood frozen behind him, wringing her hands in despair. Then came the words that would haunt me for the next 5 years. "Colton, your cancer treatment will cost our family too much. Consider us done here." The time was etched in my memory, 7:43 a.m. Breakfast remained untouched on the bedside table, the scrambled eggs growing cold. My brother Preston stared out the window, intently focused on his phone, as if attending a mundane business meeting. My father clutched a thick folder of medical bills, waving it like irrefutable evidence in court. "300,000 is the absolute minimum," he continued in a dispassionate tone, as if estimating the cost of a car repair in his workshop. "And that's without accounting for potential complications, no experimental treatments. If the first course isn't effective, we'll lose the house, the business, everything Preston has worked so hard for. Your mother's retirement. For what? For a phantom 60% chance of survival?" My mother, Judith, the same woman who once lovingly checked my forehead when I was sick and cooked chicken soup, simply nodded silently. She never once looked my way. "Mom," I croaked, my lips parched. The chemotherapy had already begun to ravage my throat. "Are you really going to leave me here alone?" She turned away, facing the wall. "Your father is right. We have to think about our family's future." Preston finally looked up from his phone. "It's simple math, Colt. 1 life against 3. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions." That same morning, they left me forever. They changed their phone numbers, vanished without a trace, and even convinced my girlfriend Meredith that her life would be ruined if she stayed with me. Within 3 hours, I went from being surrounded by family to being utterly alone. Recently, 5 years after that terrible morning, a lawyer in an impeccable Armani suit knocked on the door of my modest apartment. "Harrison Aldridge," he introduced himself, mentioning the name of a prestigious downtown firm. His smile was gentle but discerning, and in his hands he held a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Colton Ryder?" he asked. When I nodded, expecting to hear about some overdue medical debt, he uttered words that made my legs buckle. "I'm here about a $63 million inheritance left specifically for you." I burst out laughing, genuinely laughed, because what else was there to do when life throws such cruel surprises? But Harrison didn't share my amusement. He pulled out document after document, official seals and signatures covering papers whose meaning I could barely grasp. "The donor," he said with that same soft smile, "specifically asked me to personally deliver his final message to you. He wanted you to know that Samuel Haversham, the night janitor who cleaned your hospital room during your treatment, never forgot the boy who was abandoned but refused to give up. The boy they said was too expensive to save. Sam, the quiet old man who mopped my floors at night and secretly brought me crackers when I couldn't afford dinner. The janitor who sat beside me during the worst nights of chemotherapy, when the pain made me wish for death. He was the owner of $63 million, and he bequeathed every last cent to me, to the very guy whose life his own father had calculated on a calculator and decided wasn't worth the investment. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why a hospital janitor left me such an enormous fortune, you need to know what happened during those 5 years between my betrayal and receiving the inheritance. You need to understand what it means at 19 to fight cancer alone, working 3 jobs, poisoning your body with chemotherapy, proving you're worth saving when everyone who should have loved you decided you weren't. My name is Colton Ryder. I'm 24 years old. 5 years ago, my family left me to die in a hospital bed because cancer made me too expensive. Recently, I became a multimillionaire because a stranger saw my worth when my own blood couldn't. This is my story. It's a familiar tale, one of life, as sharp turns. The life of a 19-year-old boy gave no hint of storms ahead. He had plans that seemed unshakable. From Monday to Friday, he learned the ropes of carpentry at Brennan Construction, mastering the art of framing houses and crafting custom furniture. His hands, calloused and skilled, bore the marks of his trade. Rick Brennan, his mentor, often noted his natural talent, predicting that by 25 he could be running his own crew if he kept working hard. Weekends belonged to Meredith, his sweetheart since high school. They'd head to the mountains in his beat-up Ford Ranger, exploring hidden trails and sharing dreams of the future. Meredith was studying to be a nurse, and he was saving money for trade school. They had a clear plan: marry at 23, buy an old house he'd renovate himself, and have kids by 27. Simple, yet profoundly important dreams. Every Friday evening, he unfailingly went to his parents' house on Maple Street for dinner, the same brick ranch where he grew up, where his height marks were still on the kitchen doorframe, and Little League trophies gathered dust in the living room. Mom would make her signature pot roast with small red potatoes that melted in your mouth. The aroma of that dish, mingling with the scent of pine sawdust and the WD-40 his father used in his auto shop, greeted everyone who crossed the threshold. "Colton's here," Mom would joyfully announce, though everyone already knew. His brother, Preston, would arrive 15 minutes later, as if timing his entrance to show how busy he was without being disrespectful. He'd walk in, dressed in his impeccable real estate agent suit, which cost more than Colton's monthly earnings. Preston would talk about his latest deals and promising projects that were sure to bring him wealth. "Little brother still playing with wood," Preston would tease, ruffling Colton's hair as if he were 12 again. "You know, I could get you a real job, right? With a tie, a decent salary." "Someone has to build the houses you sell," Colton retorted, and his father would chuckle approvingly from his favorite armchair, a beer bottle in hand. Vernon Ryder, Colton's father, was a simple man with calloused hands and firm beliefs about the importance of hard work. He built his auto shop from scratch, starting in a garage when Colton was 5, and turning it into a full-fledged shop with 3 lifts and 2 employees by the time his son was in high school. He believed in earning an honest living, paying bills on time, and never taking handouts. "A man's worth is his labor." This oft-repeated phrase became a sort of family creed. Mom, Judith Ryder, worked as a retail manager at Davidson's department store downtown. 30 years of impeccable work without a single sick day was her particular pride. She valued stability above all else: a steady job, good health insurance, retirement contributions. She had family budget spreadsheets dating back to 1995, where every expense was meticulously accounted for and categorized. "Plan for the worst, hope for the best," she advised her sons, regularly updating her multicolored financial folders. The headaches began in March, shortly before Colton's 19th birthday. At first, it was just a dull pressure behind his eyes, like after a long day of working with blueprints or inhaling sawdust. He popped painkillers like candy and kept working. One day, Rick noticed him wince while working the circular saw. "You all right, kid?" Rick asked with concern, turning off the machine. "Just a headache," Colton replied, already reaching to turn the saw back on. But the pain grew worse, sharp, piercing, making his vision blur. He felt nauseous for no apparent reason. He'd have to stop in the middle of a task, clutching his head as the world spun around him. Meredith begged him to see a doctor, but he'd inherited his father's stubbornness about medical care. "It's a waste of money to be told I need rest and more water," he insisted. But April 15th arrived, tax day, which was especially ironic given how that date would impact his life. He was installing fascia on a house under construction, standing on a ladder with a nail gun, when everything suddenly went black. Rick said he fell 8 feet, as if someone had cut the strings holding him up. The nail gun fired as he hit the ground, a nail flying inches from his leg. He woke up in Denver Hospital, with Dr. Patricia Knowles standing over him, her face expressing the sympathy and concern common to doctors delivering bad news. Grim news was impending. My mother, as if rooted to the spot, sat in a chair next to me. My father, in contrast, stood frozen by the window, lost in thought, while Preston, leaning against the doorframe, seemed to be mentally plotting his escape. "Colton," Dr. Knowles began, a note of regret in her voice, "CT scans have revealed some abnormalities in your lymph nodes. After further tests, I regret to inform you that you have stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma." Cancer. The word, like a sinister ghost, hung heavy and suffocating in the sterile air of the room. My mother's hand clutched mine convulsively, so tightly that her wedding ring dug into my palm. Not a muscle twitched on my father's face, but I noticed him instinctively reach for his phone. opening the calculator app. The first weeks of treatment brought hope. Chemotherapy was grueling, but I managed. The nurses at Denver Hospital knew my name, brought extra blankets, and shared tips on combating nausea. I FaceTimed Meredith, and she, between classes, showed me her medical notes, explaining how each drug worked in the body. My mother visited every morning before her shift at Davidson's, bringing homemade muffins I couldn't eat but appreciated her care. Even Preston dropped by a couple of times, awkwardly patted my shoulder, and left a stack of sports magazines bought from the hospital gift shop. However, something subtly shifted in the atmosphere at home. I sensed it in how my father's visits shortened as he spent more and more time in the hallway talking on the phone. My mother's smile became strained, her eyes red, as if she had recently cried, but not because of my illness, but because of some arguments. Preston stopped appearing altogether after the second week. Then came May 8th, a Wednesday morning, which began with an unexpected flurry of activity. I woke up to find my entire family in the hospital room before 7 a.m. My father held a thick folder of documents. My mother stood behind him, turned away towards the window. Preston sat in a chair, engrossed in his phone. "We need to talk, son," my father began in the tone he usually used to inform employees of their dismissal. He opened the folder and spread the papers on the hospital table. Medical bills, insurance statements, payment schedules, everything had been meticulously analyzed and marked in his neat handwriting. "I've crunched the numbers with the insurance company and the hospital's billing department. Your treatment, even with 70% coverage, will cost us approximately $300. And that's in an ideal scenario, no complications, additional courses, or experimental therapy." I watched as my father took out his phone and launched the calculator app he'd been using for the past few weeks. "The house is worth $420,000. We still owe $200,000 on the mortgage. The workshop barely covers expenses. Your mother's retirement account has $80,000. Preston's wedding is planned for next year. Deposits have already been made." "Dad, we'll manage," I croaked, my voice still weak from yesterday's procedure. "I can work when I get better. There are payment plans, right?" Vernon shook his head. "You don't understand, Colton. It's not just about the money. It's about survival, the survival of the whole family." He put down his phone and for the first time that morning looked me directly in the eyes. "Your survival rate at stage 2 is 60%. That means there's a 40% chance we'll derail everything 3 generations of riders have built. Pointless." Those words hurt more than any side effect of chemotherapy. "I'm your son." "And Preston is my son too," my father retorted. "Your mother is my wife. I have to think about everyone, not just you." My mother finally turned away from the window. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her voice was firm. "We've made a decision, Colton. We can't risk everything. You're young. If the treatment doesn't work, we'll lose everything. The house, the business, Preston's future, our retirement. We'll be out on the streets at 50. Preston looked up from his phone. "It's basic economics, Colt. The interests of the majority outweigh the interests of the minority. I have 3 development projects on the horizon that could set me up for life, but only if I don't have to sell everything to pay your medical bills." My parents decided to withdraw their support for my medical bills. I felt reality crash down on me like an icy shower. I realized my family had chosen money over my life. My father, maintaining an unsettling calm, clarified that they were choosing the family's survival over a risky gamble with an uncertain outcome. According to my father, saving his son was prohibitively expensive, and the mathematical calculations left no room for hope. Those words were etched into my memory for a long time, like a brand, too expensive to save. I felt like a broken part in a workshop whose repair wasn't worth the cost. In despair, I questioned love, family values, those dinners where family was put above all else. My father, gathering his papers, stated that this was exactly what they were doing, choosing the family with the best chance of survival. He informed me they were leaving, changing phone numbers, and moving to Castle Rock, where Preston had found them a suitable place. My mother had already transferred to another Davidson store. My mother approached my bed, leaned in as if to kiss me, but instead whispered that she was sorry about my illness, but they couldn't let me drag them down. She concluded that sometimes love means having to let go. My parents left the room one by one, my father with his folder under his arm, my mother without looking back. Preston lingered at the door, expressing hope for my recovery, but emphasized that I'd have to manage without their help. The door closed, leaving me utterly alone, with poison coursing through my veins and beeping machines all around. I was abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. In the first 24 hours after my family left, I wished only for death, not from cancer, but from betrayal. I lay there, staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them to distract myself from thoughts of how my father had valued my life and found it wanting. The nurses, noticing the change, whispered in the hallways, brought extra drinks, and checked on me more frequently. Then Beatrice Washington, the hospital social worker, a 62-year-old woman with silver braids wrapped around her head and glasses that magnified her brown eyes, entered the room. She pulled a chair up to my bed, and I smelled her lavender hand lotion. Beatrice spoke the words that saved my life. She offered me a choice: either give up and prove right those who abandoned me, or rise up and prove there are things that cannot be measured by money. I replied with an empty voice that my family wouldn't be coming back. Beatrice unexpectedly agreed, stating that now I didn't need to waste energy on people who didn't deserve it. She suggested we discuss what I would do instead. Beatrice opened a folder, thicker than my father's folder of bills. Instead of reasons to give up, it contained solutions, applications for charitable aid, payment plan options, funds for young cancer patients, odd jobs I could do from my hospital bed. Beatrice told me about the hospital's financial aid program, capable of covering up to 60% of bills if I met the criteria, which I did. The remaining amount could be paid in small monthly installments. According to her, the hospital needed money, but preferred it from living patients who could pay, rather than from dead ones who couldn't pay at all. I asked her why she cared about my fate. Beatrice, rolling up her sleeve, showed me a small phoenix tattoo on her wrist and explained that 30 years ago she was diagnosed with breast cancer and her husband left her, saying he hadn't signed up to be a nurse. But she survived, and her ex-husband was now on his third divorce. Beatrice concluded that the best revenge isn't to die, proving them right, but to live, proving them wrong. To defy their skepticism, he decided to live against all odds. That evening, Beatrice, like a guardian angel, brought him a laptop from the Lost and Found, and together they devised a strategy. He intended to fight cancer with every available means, but in parallel, he had to wage war against the debts that suffocated him. Every day, between grueling procedures, he planned to work tirelessly. Data entry, which he could do from his hospital bed, paid $15 an hour. Medical transcription promised $18. Online tutoring for high school students in math and basic woodworking skills could bring in $20. But first and foremost, Beatrice insisted, you need a reason to survive, something more significant than simple anger. She was absolutely right. Anger could serve as a spark to start the engine, but it couldn't fuel a long and difficult journey. He found his reason the next day when Timothy, a 7-year-old boy suffering from leukemia, was transferred to the neighboring room. His parents lived in another city, a 3-hour drive away, and could only visit on weekends as they couldn't afford to miss work. He watched the boy eat his dinner alone, engrossed in coloring superhero books, all while tethered to an IV pole. Then he wheeled his own IV pole over and offered to keep him company. They spent 3 hours building a tower out of medicine cups and wooden spatulas. When the tower finally collapsed, the child's clear laughter filled the entire room. At that moment, he realized he would fight for his life to help children like Timothy, children whose families couldn't or wouldn't be there. Chemotherapy initially worsened his condition before improvement set in. 6 months of treatment stretched to 8 and then to 10. His hair fell out in clumps. His weight dropped from 180 to 115 pounds. Sometimes the nausea was so severe that he could only work for an hour before passing out, but he didn't give up. Between treatments, he stocked shelves at a convenience store, using his IV pole as an improvised cane. He delivered newspapers at 4 a.m., as the cool morning air helped with the sweats caused by chemotherapy. He did data entry until his eyes burned and his fingers cramped. Sam, the night janitor, became his silent companion. He would clean his room around midnight, always taking longer than necessary and sometimes even sitting in the visitor's chair during his break. He rarely said anything beyond a mumbled greeting, but always left crackers on his bedside table when he noticed he'd missed dinner due to work. One day, he woke up to find Sam had repaired his laptop charger with electrical tape and a paperclip. "You're a fighter," he said one evening, and it was the longest sentence he'd ever heard from him. That's rare these days. Meredith tried to call him 3 months after his family had turned their backs on him. He answered, desperately needing support. "Colton, your dad came to my parents. He said if I stayed with you, it would ruin my future, that I'd spend my best years paying off your medical debts instead of living my life." What he said made sense. "Do you love me?" he asked. "Love doesn't pay the bills," she replied, echoing his father's pragmatic cruelty. "I'm sorry, but I have to think about my future." After that conversation, he taped a note to his bathroom mirror. "You are worth saving." Every morning, after bouts of chemotherapy-induced nausea, he would read it aloud. Some days he didn't believe it, but he repeated those words anyway, because Timothy needed someone to build towers, and because Beatrice believed in him. And somewhere deep inside, he had to prove that his worth couldn't be measured in monetary terms. 5 years flew by in this rhythm, 5 years of grueling 16-hour workdays, instant noodle dinners, and walking everywhere to save on gas. The cancer went into remission after 14 months of treatment, but the debt remained, a massive $200,000, even after receiving charitable aid and negotiated discounts. He moved into a tiny studio apartment above a Chinese restaurant, where the smell of sesame oil became his constant aroma, and the thin walls allowed him to learn Mandarin curse words from his neighbors' late-night phone calls. Last Tuesday began like any other day. 500 a.m., newspaper delivery, 800 a.m., warehouse shift, 200 p.m., food delivery. By 800 p.m., he was heating up his usual instant noodle dinner with a cracked egg added for extra protein when there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp, confident, professional knocks. He opened the door to see a man in an Armani suit that probably cost more than his annual rent. Silver hair was perfectly coiffed, a leather briefcase gleamed under the dim hallway light, and a Rolex watch flashed as he extended his hand. Suddenly, as he extended his hand in greeting, the man said, "Colton Ryder, my name is Harrison Aldridge, representing Aldrich & Associates. I need to discuss a matter concerning an inheritance with you." Colton couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh that echoed through the cramped hallway. "Unless my father left me his old calculator, I'm afraid you have the wrong address." The reply came swiftly. "May I come in? I assure you this is legitimate and very much concerns you." Something in the stranger's tone made Colton step back, allowing him into his humble abode. Harrison's expensive shoes clicked a crisp rhythm on the worn linoleum as he surveyed the studio, an air mattress tucked into a corner, a card table serving as a desk, and 3 shirts modestly hung on a clothesline strung across the window. There was no judgment in his gaze, only impartial observation. Placing his briefcase on the card table, Harrison pulled out a stack of documents. "Ryder, a donor who wished to remain anonymous until a certain point, has left you his entire fortune." Disbelieving, Colton blurted out, "This is some kind of scam. I don't know anyone with a lot of money. The richest person I know is my brother, but he wouldn't give me a dime, even if I was starving." Harrison offered a faint smile, as if he knew more than he was letting on. "The estate is valued at $63 million. Colton's legs gave out, and he collapsed onto a folding chair, which groaned plaintively under the sudden weight. $63 million? That's impossible. Who would leave me that kind of money?" "Before revealing the donor's identity, he wanted me to share his story with you," Harrison replied, pulling out a handwritten letter in a shaky but firm script. The donor, born in 1951 in rural Nebraska, dropped out of school to support his family. For 40 years, he worked as a janitor, and by night, in his garage, he passionately pursued electronics. He held 17 patents for medical devices, particularly in chemotherapy delivery systems. His inventions saved thousands of lives and generated hundreds of millions of dollars in licensing fees. Colton's hands trembled. "Sam?" Harrison nodded affirmatively. "Samuel Haversham. He cleaned your hospital room during your treatment." Sam, a millionaire? The word seemed incredible. Sam, who wore the same gray uniform every night, ate vending machine sandwiches and muttered about circuit boards while mopping floors. "Mr. Haversham lived a modest life by choice," Harrison explained. He had no family, no children. For 40 years he watched patients fight for their lives, but you caught his eye. He said he'd never seen anyone fight so desperately with so little support. He often sat in your room during his breaks, watching you work on your laptop, even when you could barely stay conscious. Harrison pulled out another document. He left very specific instructions. The entire fortune goes to you, but with one condition: a portion of the funds must be used to establish a fund for abandoned medical patients. He wrote, and I quote, "Colton Ryder was deemed too expensive to save by those who should have loved him most. He proved that the value of a human life cannot be measured in dollars. This money is to ensure no patient ever fights alone again." Tears streamed down Colton's face, and he made no attempt to stop them. Sam had been there with him during the toughest nights, when he vomited blood and wished for death. He simply sat nearby, a man of few words, so Colton wouldn't feel alone. "There's one more thing," Harrison said quietly. "Mr. Haversham kept a journal. He often wrote about you." He handed Colton a battered notebook, which he opened at random. Sam's shaky handwriting filled the pages. The boy worked on his computer until 3 a.m., though he had chemotherapy only 6 hours ago. His family hasn't visited him in 4 months. He doesn't know I slightly increased his morphine dose when the pain became unbearable. He doesn't know I paid for his antibiotics when the insurance company refused to cover them. He doesn't realize his worth, but I do. It's immeasurable. His true worth was not immediately apparent to him, but Sam Haversham, the humble janitor, saw it unmistakably. That worth was immeasurable. When did he pass? Colton's voice trembled, betraying a storm of emotions. 2 weeks ago. Pancreatic cancer. He refused to fight, stating his life had been long and full, and that his resources should serve life, not prolong decline. His last thoughts were of you. He said, "Tell Colton his father was wrong. His life was worth saving. It was worth the world." Colton hugged the journal to himself, tears of gratitude streaming down his cheeks in memory of the quiet hero who had seen his true value while his own blood had turned away. The next morning, the check was cashed. A massive sum of $63 million was deposited into an account opened in the name his father had once disowned. The bank manager, astonished, personally called Colton to ensure there was no mistake, and likely couldn't comprehend how a man with such wealth could be living above a Chinese restaurant and eating instant noodles. Colton's first call was to Beatrice Washington, the social worker whose support and faith had saved him from despair. "Colton, honey, how are you?" Her voice sounded warm and concerned. "Beatrice, please sit down," he asked. "I need a list of all the patients in your program who are struggling with medical bills, every single one." "That's over 200 people, Colton. What are you planning?" "I intend to pay off all their debts, to the last cent." A silence hung on the line, broken only by stifled sobs. "Colton, what happened? Did you rob a bank?" "No. But Sam Haversham, the humble janitor, left me his fortune because he believed in me, even when my family turned away. Now, I want everyone to know they are worth saving." Without wasting time, Colton established the Haversham Foundation to assist patients facing hardship due to exorbitant medical expenses. The paperwork was complex, but he entrusted the task to Harrison Aldridge's firm. The foundation was designed to provide financial support, psychological aid, and essential resources to those abandoned by their loved ones due to insurmountable debts. No one else should have to spend Thanksgiving alone, eating vending machine food. No one should have to choose between life and a roof over their head. Soon, the long-awaited call came. It was his brother, Preston, calling from an unfamiliar number. "Colton, it's me. Don't hang up." Colton remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "We heard about your inheritance. Dad wants to talk to you. Mom's been crying all morning." "We made a mistake. We were just scared. You have to understand, 300,000 was all our savings." "How did you know?" Colton wondered, as he hadn't made any public announcements yet. "It's all over Denver's financial papers. A $63 million fortune went to a 24-year-old cancer survivor. Some journalist connected all the dots. Dad read about it this morning at the workshop. Now he wants to make amends. We're family, Colton. Family forgives. You can't hold one mistake forever." "One mistake?" The anger he had suppressed for so long began to rise, but Colton tried to remain calm. You put a price tag on my life. Dad said I was too expensive. Mom said letting me go was an act of love. You called it basic economics. That wasn't one mistake, Preston. It was a complete lack of humanity. Then Vernon, Colton's father, joined the conversation. Son, we did what we thought was best for the whole family. We tried to protect everyone's future. No, Dad, you protected your assets. Those are different things. Don't be stubborn, Colton. You have more money now than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. Your mother has been beside herself ever since we left. She wants to see you. We are your family. Samuel Haversham was my family, Colton replied calmly. Beatrice Washington is my family. The nurses who held my hand during chemotherapy are my family. Timothy, the 7-year-old boy with leukemia who shared dinner with me when his parents couldn't visit, is my family. Family doesn't put a price tag on your life in an Excel sheet. Family doesn't abandon you because you're expensive. Family sees your worth even when on paper you're worth nothing. She realized her true worth only when, formally, she was worth nothing. So that's it. You're just going to punish us indefinitely. Keep all that money for yourself, driven by vengeance. I'm not keeping it, Dad. I'm giving it to complete strangers who need it much more than you do. The Haversham Charitable Foundation will help thousands of people who were abandoned by their own families. People like me, who were deemed too expensive to save. You're making a huge mistake, he said, and his voice took on a steely edge, the mask of benevolence finally slipping. We are your real family. No, you're just my blood relatives. You clearly showed me the difference between those concepts. Sam Haversham, an ordinary janitor earning a modest $17 an hour, was by my side during the hardest moments of my life. You, on the other hand, didn't even bother to visit me when you decided I wasn't worth your investment. Who, in your opinion, deserves more to be called family? She ended the call and blocked the phone number. To date, the Haversham Foundation has supported over 400 patients who were abandoned. The organization has paid off $12 million in medical debt, provided housing for patients undergoing lengthy treatments, and created a broad support network to ensure no one feels alone in their fight against illness. She carefully keeps Sam's janitor badge on her desk, next to his personal journal, and a photo a nurse secretly took one night, catching him fixing her broken laptop charger. Cancer reminded her of mortality, showing how fragile human life can be. But her family's betrayal taught her a far more valuable lesson. Love isn't measured in dollars. Family isn't just about blood ties, and sometimes the quietest angels are those who mop hospital floors late at night, carrying compassion and mercy in their hearts, moving mops with hands that are truly worth more than gold.